Now, Takeoff's murder was one of the most shocking moments in hip-hop in the last few years. A night that was supposed to be a casual hangout in Houston turned into a tragedy that nobody saw coming. When the news broke, headlines told the same story. Takeoff killed over a dice game gone wrong. But that's not the full story. There are still a lot of misconceptions about what actually happened that night. So in this video, we're going to break down the real story behind Takeoff's murder, how things escalated that night, and the case developments that left more questions than answers. Now, Takeoff wasn't just another rapper. He was one-third of Migos, the group that took Atlanta's trap sound and pushed it into the mainstream. And Migos wasn't just a rap group. It was a movement and a family, which consisted of Quavo, Offset, and last but not least, Kershnick Ball, professionally known as Takeoff. Now, Quavo was Takeoff's uncle. However, the three of them grew up together in Gwinnett County, Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. Quavo and Takeoff were raised in the same house, while Offset joined their circle in the 6th grade. Eventually, Quavo and Takeoff introduced Offset to rap, and from there, Migos was born. Migos didn't just make hits, they changed the entire sound of modern hip-hop. Their triplet flow, first popularized in songs like Versace and Hannah Montana, became one of the most imitated styles in this generation of rap. Their first major breakthrough came in 2013 with Versace. But what really took them to the next level was when Drake hopped on the remix. That moment catapulted them into mainstream success, and from there, they dominated the charts, dropping hit after hit. Fight Night, T-shirt, Bad and Bougie, Motorsport, you name it. Beyond just music, Migos influenced fashion and hip-hop, and of course, the way rappers structure their flows. They're pioneers, and Takeoff played a huge role in that success. But by 2022, things weren't the same for the group. The group had stopped moving as a unit, and there were rumors that Offset and Quavo had fallen out, with speculation that it has something to do with Offset allegedly sleeping with Quavo's ex, Sweetie. Quavo seemed to reference this in his song Messy, rapping, "BITCH, F my dog behind my back, but I ain't stressing." None of them ever confirmed the rumors publicly, but one thing was clear. Migos weren't clearly together anymore.
You can't just act like and just continue like. And I think people be trying to make it like it's not about it's like Alexis. It's like we can't continue our group without the main man.
Then in November 2022, everything changed forever. A night that started as a private gathering had sadly now turned into national tragedy.
At approximately 2:30 this morning, our officers were dispatched out here to a shooting that had just occurred. Upon arrival, they located multiple shell casings on the 3rd level of the building at the 810 Bowling and Billiards. I guess it's a bowling and pool hall. We were informed that there was a private party being held at the event last night that ended at approximately 1 a.m., but the party carried over till about 2 a.m. till they were cleared out. That's when the shooting occurred, where it left one male deceased on scene and 2 others that were transported to area hospitals nearby.
On November 1st, 2022, Takeoff and Quavo were in Houston, Texas, attending a private gathering at 810 Billiards and Bowling, an upscale venue in downtown Houston. The event was hosted by Jay Prince Jr., the son of Rap-A-Lot Records founder Jay Prince, a powerful figure in the rap industry, known for his deep ties to Houston's hip-hop scene. The guest list was exclusive, with around 40 to 50 attendees, including local music industry figures, promoters, and close affiliates of Jay Prince Jr. Security was present, but this wasn't a club event. This was a private invitation-only affair. The official event wrapped up around 1 a.m., but just like most private functions, many guests, including Takeoff and Quavo, stuck around for an hour. Conversations continued, drinks were poured, and the night carried on as usual inside. By 2:30 a.m., the gathering spilled out onto the 3rd floor balcony area, which overlooked Houston's streets below. The mood seemed relaxed at first, but shortly after that, things took a deadly turn. As tension escalated, Quavo found himself face to face with multiple people, caught in a heated argument over a dice game where someone had lost a large amount of money. The situation grew more intense by the second. Surveillance footage later captured Quavo visibly frustrated, attempting to de-escalate the situation and walk away. But before he could leave, things escalated quickly. His last words before it all went left, "We don't play like that, bruh." Seconds later, gunfire erupted. At least 2 different weapons were fired. Chaos broke out as people scrambled for cover, running in all directions. Police later recovered 10 shell casings at the scene, 9 from a .40 caliber firearm and 1 from a 9mm firearm. Takeoff was unfortunately caught in the crossfire. He was hit twice, once in the back and once in the head. Both bullets later recovered from his body were medium caliber. 2 other people, a 23-year-old woman and a 24-year-old woman, were also shot and rushed to the hospital. At about 2:30 a.m., police eventually received a call about a shooting at 1210 San Jacinto Street in downtown Houston. When officers arrived, the scene was nearly empty. Most of the witnesses had already fled. Security was however present, but none of them saw who pulled the trigger. Takeoff was already pronounced dead at this point. With little immediate cooperation from witnesses, detectives had to rely on hard evidence to piece together what happened. Surveillance footage from the scene later revealed a Patrick Clark in the crowd, holding a gun in one hand and an object in the other. As the chaos unfolded, Clark was seen firing multiple rounds. Forensic analysis determined that the shots fired by Clark aligned with the direction where Takeoff was standing. Clark was the only person visibly caught on surveillance, discharging a firearm in that direction. After firing those shots, Clark fled on foot, briefly ducking inside the House of Blues, before disappearing from the scene. With so many people refusing to come forward, Houston police publicly pleaded for anyone at the private gathering to share information. But despite the heavy media attention, over 30 witnesses remained silent.
Right now, Houston police say they've got very few leads in the fatal shooting of rapper Takeoff, part of the group Migos. This morning, police are asking witnesses to come forward with any video or testimony they might have that could help lead to an arrest.
At this point, Patrick Clark was already on their radar as a potential suspect, but they had yet to fully identify him. Investigators simply needed more leads, more evidence, and most importantly, cooperation from witnesses. But despite their efforts, over 30 people who had been at the scene decided to stay silent. Nobody wanted to talk. Whether out of fear, loyalty, or simply not wanting to be labeled a snitch, nobody was willing to come forward. We've boiled it down to over 30 people that were standing outside the bowling alley. Homicide Division Sergeant Michael Burrows said, "Literally every single one of those people left the scene without giving a statement to police. We found a few of them that night. We found others since then. But it's important that those people come forward," Houston police said. With no cooperation from witnesses, police were left with one undeniable fact. Kirshnikari Ball, known to the world as Takeoff, had just become the latest victim of gun violence. Takeoff's death shook the entire hip-hop community. I mean, fans were grieving, Atlanta was grieving, but nobody felt it more than the people who knew him the best. Offset was definitely hurting. You could see it in his eyes every time he spoke about Take. They built an empire together, and now 1/3 of Migos was gone forever. Quavo was also hurting, and in early 2023, he dropped a song called Without You, a heartbreaking tribute to Takeoff. And man, when I first heard this song, I gotta say, this one hit different. You could definitely feel every ounce of pain in his voice. But if there was anyone who felt this loss on a level deeper than anyone else, it was Takeoff's mother, Tatiana Davenport. For Tatiana, this wasn't just a tragedy. It was a failure of security, a failure of responsibility, and a failure to protect her son. In June 2023, she filed a wrongful death lawsuit against A10 Billiards and Bowling, the very establishment where Takeoff was killed. Her argument, this tragedy could have been prevented. The lawsuit claimed that the venue knew this event would attract celebrities, athletes, and high-profile guests. Yet, there was no proper security screening, no enforcement of after-hour rules, and no measures in place to prevent violence. And when tensions started rising that night, nothing was done to de-escalate the situation. Since Takeoff wasn't part of the argument, his mother believes his death could have been prevented if the venue had taken proper precautions. And this right here did raise an unsettling question. Was Takeoff's death something that could have been avoided? Or was this really just about being in the wrong place at the wrong time? Did a lack of security create this perfect storm for disaster? Either way, Tatiana wasn't gonna let things go unanswered. But long before Takeoff's mother took legal action, investigators were still deep in the process of building their case, piece by piece. With little information from witnesses, detectives had no choice but to rely on hard evidence to reconstruct what really happened that night. So they methodically pieced together the case using surveillance footage, cell phone videos, ballistic evidence, and through this process, police eventually identified 2 individuals connected to the crime scene. Cameron Joshua, 22 years old, was the first suspect arrested. However, he was only charged with weapons charges, not murder. "We believe Cameron Joshua has been appropriately charged in this case," said prosecutor Matt Gilliam. While Joshua's arrest brought some progress, it still didn't answer the biggest question: who pulled the trigger? After weeks of forensic analysis and video review, authorities identified Patrick Clark as the primary suspect. Through that, we were able to deduce that Patrick Clark is a lethal shooter in the case. That's why he's charged with murder, the Houston Police Department said. Using ballistic reports, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence, police built their case against Clark. The trajectory of his gunfire aligned with Takeoff's wounds. Investigators later discovered Clark had left behind a wine bottle at the House of Blues. His fingers on it directly linked him to the crime scene. With this evidence, police secured an arrest warrant. And on December 2nd, 2022, exactly 31 days after Takeoff's death, Patrick Xavier Clark, 33 years old at the time, was taken into custody and charged with first-degree murder. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions surrounding Takeoff's tragic death was that he was somehow involved in what happened that night, but he wasn't. There was a lucrative dice game that went on at the event. There was an argument that happened afterward, outside the bowling alley, which led to the shooting. I can tell you that Takeoff was not involved in playing the dice game. He was not involved in the argument that happened outside. He was not armed. Now, Takeoff was only at the spot because Quavo was there. I mean, he wasn't gambling and, he wasn't really caught up in anything. He was only there because they always moved together. Wherever Quavo was, Takeoff was right there beside him. And that's what makes this story so tragic. Takeoff was always described as quiet, introverted, and focused on the music, while Offset and Quavo embraced more of the lifestyle that came with the fame. Takeoff was different. He wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy, and he wasn't looking for any trouble. But that night, they weren't just anywhere. They were out in Houston after hours, in an environment that can get gritty. A group of men, many of them drinking, egos high, playing a dice game, standing outside a venue in the middle of the night. It was a recipe for disaster, and the worst part, Takeoff had nothing to do with this. And honestly, this is exactly why I keep my black ass inside. I mean, you could literally be minding your business, not bothering anyone, and still end up in the wrong place at the wrong time. Some situations just ain't really worth being around, honestly. After his arrest, Patrick Clark's bond was initially set at $2 million, but his attorneys pushed back hard, arguing that he couldn't afford it and was not a flight risk. Prosecutors, however, saw it differently. They pointed to court documents showing that Clark applied for an expedited passport to Mexico right after Takeoff's death. He also had a large amount of cash on him at the time of his arrest, raising concerns that he may have been planning to flee. Clark's attorneys fought hard to get his bond reduced to $300,000, arguing that he simply couldn't afford anything higher. But Judge Josh Hill wasn't buying it. The judge pointed out that Clark himself had previously made statements suggesting he had access to money, and on top of that, there were bail bond companies willing to take on a risk. So instead of the $2 million originally set, the judge lowered it to $1 million, but no further. For Clark's defense team, it was a partial win, but the reality was he still couldn't afford to walk free, at least not yet. Then, unexpectedly, Clark posted bond a little over a month after he got arrested for Takeoff's murder. And this is where things got a little suspicious. They ended up finding out that there was a private investigator who was working for Takeoff's accused killer's attorney, and he was listed in the bond paperwork as the facilitator of his release. But this private investigator was apparently not even actually behind Patrick Clark getting released. So the question is, where did the money come from? Clark's attorney later stated that a family friend and a concerned citizen had helped secure his release, but beyond that, the true source of the funds still remain unclear. Now, even with his release, Patrick Clark wasn't free to move as he pleased. He was placed under house arrest, required to wear a GPS ankle monitor, and barred from contacting witnesses, victims, or their families. Yet, one major question still remained. Was Patrick Clark truly the only one responsible? Now, Clark was the man police charged with Takeoff's murder. He was identified through forensic evidence, surveillance footage, and ballistics. However, the case was far from over. And this is where we get to a plot twist in this case, okay? A major plot twist that a lot of platforms still haven't really covered. So if you made it this far, make sure you drop a like on this video, okay? I appreciate you. Because what I'm about to tell you changes everything, okay? Now, the plot twist is this. A Houston Forensic Science Center analyst who was reportedly involved in processing evidence in the Takeoff murder case was fired for mishandling DNA evidence in multiple cases. Documents reveal that this now former analyst allegedly committed serious evidence processing errors that might have affected several investigations, including Takeoff's murder.
Forensic analyst Rochelle Austin was considered a witness in the case against Patrick Clark, a man who police believe is responsible for shooting and killing Grammy-nominated rapper Takeoff at a Houston bowling alley. State's DNA samples Austin processed had been switched in one instance. In another, court documents say she skipped a step and processed the wrong sample. These are cases unrelated to Clark, but according to criminal defense attorney Murray Newman, the Brady notice is an indicator to the defense that there is something that may contradict their client's guilt.
Just when the case against Patrick Clark seemed airtight, this happened. This forensic analyst at the Houston Forensic Science Center was now at the center of this controversy, and she actually ended up getting fired for this. Now, this isn't just speculation, this is on record. The Harris County District Attorney's Office filed what's called a Brady notice, a legal document that requires them to inform Patrick Clark's defense team about the termination of this forensic analyst and any issues that could affect a fair trial. Now, they said that the reason for her termination was lack of quality work, among other serious concerns. She apparently switched DNA samples in one case, and she also skipped a step and processed the wrong sample in another. While these specific errors were reportedly in other cases, the fact still remains. This forensic analyst was apparently involved in the Takeoff investigation. So now the biggest question is, how much of a role did she actually play? Because if there's even a slight chance that any of her work touched the forensic evidence in this case, it could change everything. And that's exactly what Takeoff's accused killer's defense team is now questioning. This is something of concern for us, and we will be investigating it to see exactly how it affects our client's case, Patrick Clark's attorney said. Now, let's not forget, the entire reason Patrick Clark was arrested wasn't just forensic evidence. It was a combination of forensic analysis, surveillance footage, and ballistics. And like we talked about, he was caught on surveillance footage holding a gun and firing shots the night Takeoff was killed. They also said he left a wine bottle behind, and that his fingerprints on that bottle linked him to the crime scene. But now, with this forensic analyst's credibility completely in question, the defense has a major opening to challenge how the forensic evidence in this case was handled. And according to a criminal defense attorney, whose name is Murray Newman, who's not involved in this particular case but spoke on a forensic mishandling issue, this is apparently a huge problem for the prosecution. Since she did mess up, they can never put her on a stand again, and the defense attorney would eat her alive, he said. So what exactly does all this mean? Well, if the forensic evidence is compromised in any way, it could weaken the entire case against Takeoff's accused killer. And even if one inconsistency is found in how the DNA was processed, this could actually be enough for Patrick Clark's defense team to challenge the charges, meaning Takeoff's alleged killer could walk free. After posting bond in early 2023, Patrick Clark was placed on house arrest with a GPS monitor strapped to his ankle and was required to surrender his passport as part of his bond conditions. For months, this was his reality, but then in November 2023, the case took another unexpected turn. A judge ruled to remove his house arrest and GPS monitoring restrictions, meaning Clark was no longer confined to his home. However, that didn't mean he was completely free. He was still required to follow strict legal conditions: a nightly curfew from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., banned from contacting witnesses, victims, or Takeoff's family, required to appear in court whenever scheduled. But here's the thing, since that last legal update in November 2023, there hasn't been any official word on his current status. Is Clark still out on bond? Have new restrictions been placed on him? Or has something changed behind the scenes? Right now, we don't have the answers, but one thing we do know, his case is far from over. Just a few days ago in February 2025, Patrick Clark was scheduled to appear in court, but once again, the trial has stalled. And this time, the holdup isn't from witness silence or legal delays. It's because of the forensic controversy that has cast doubt over the evidence. As it stands, Patrick Clark is still facing murder charges. But with this forensic scandal shaking up the case, the biggest question now is, what happens next? Now, his defense could definitely challenge the forensic evidence, forcing the court to re-examine how solid the case really is. I mean, it's crazy to say that even if one little inconsistency is found in how the DNA was processed, it could literally be enough to argue that this entire forensic process was compromised. And if that argument holds up, well, I'm sure we all know what it means. It could change everything. But regardless of what happens in the courtroom, one thing will never change. Takeoff is gone. His family, friends, and fans still want justice. They don't want another case where the system fails to hold the right people accountable. And honestly, it makes you wonder, will Takeoff actually ever get the justice he deserves? From the moment Takeoff was killed, the public image was fed a simple story, a dice game gone wrong. But as we've broken down in this video, the reality runs much deeper. Takeoff wasn't gambling. He wasn't even supposed to be there. Yet here we are, years later, and his case is still tangled in delays, unanswered questions, and now a forensic scandal that could change everything. The official story might have told you that this was a tragic but straightforward case, but the truth is that Takeoff's case is filled with gaps. Gaps in the investigation, gaps in witness cooperation, and now gaps in the forensic evidence that was supposed to be rock solid. Takeoff's death was nothing short of tragic. Imagine stepping out for a casual night with your uncle, Quavo, someone who's been by your side your entire life, only to lose your life over an argument you had nothing to do with. For those who don't know, Quavo wasn't just a rap partner. He was Takeoff's actual uncle. They grew up together in the same household, with Takeoff looking up to Quavo as both family and inspiration. Takeoff was quiet, laid back, and focused on his craft. He wasn't a type to be caught up in drama, and that's exactly what makes this story so heartbreaking. A talented artist, a genuine soul, gone way too soon. And the worst part, his case is still filled with more questions than answers. Will justice ever come? Only time will tell. If you made it this far, how about drop a like on this video, because obviously we're working very hard right now. Appreciate you guys so much for watching this video. And if you're new here, my name is Blacky Speakz. Nice to meet you. Welcome to the family. Thank you for subscribing. What do you guys think about this conversation regarding the untold story about Takeoff's death? I'm really curious to hear what you guys have to say, and I'll catch you guys in the comment section below. But most importantly of all, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Have a good day. Have a good night. Peace. I'm out. Deuces.